How can this photograph here be so simple to put together and yet so impossibly difficult to actually recreate? Today we're going to find out. How's it? This is a volume of images by a photographer called Nadav Kandars. This is a wonderful little, fairly slim volume by Stern magazine publishers. I think they're the same people, and they put together these copies of a photographer's work. There is a wonderful introduction to the broad spectrum of that photographer if you can't afford something like this, because sometimes these books can start getting a bit pricey. But yes, so today we're going to look at Nadav Kandars. He is what a wonderful photographer, and it's been completely remiss of me that I have never featured him on the channel before. Some of his pictures have shown up, but I've never specifically talked about his work. He does so much stuff, like documentary, sort of like a bit sort of getting out there in the wider world. He does commercial photography, he does arty kind of photography, he does these wonderful portraits. He does those deceptively simple images that I thought, I'm going to copy. I used to have a little lookbook of things, and once upon a time I went, I'm going to try this. I have a small stool. I'm going to get a young lady to stand, jump off, and for some reason it just doesn't feel the same. But that was as far as I was able to recreate Nadav Kandars' photography. And I'm going to start at the portrait section of his body of work, because that is what initially drew me to his images. These technically bizarre photographs that I was just like, these are kind of cool. Something funky is going on here. I like this sort of technical jiggery pokery. And I think that I am a fairly competent photographer when it comes to analyzing technical aspects of a photograph. But these had me stumped. It's like, okay, well, there's a bit of motion blur going on there, but then also feels like there's a bit of soft focus, a bit of diffraction going on in the tones. Then there's this kind of weird halo around them. What is going on? It seemed like the more that I look at them, the more that I go, I think I've got a handle on how he's actually, done this, the more it seems to be like a dead end. And I've done some investigating and stuff. There doesn't seem to be anybody who, certainly not Nadav himself, has gone, this is how I do it. But it's a wonderful idea about getting back into that kind of alchemy of photography. That was a phrase that I heard about 10 years ago now. And it's so it perfectly summed up the joy of photography. That often you don't really know what you're going to get until you press the shutter. And that's that. I look at these portraits, and yes, they're famous people. Yes, some of them have, something that's a little bit more obvious, a double exposure or something like that going on, or they have that kind of cross-processing feel, but not the E6 to C41. So that's not when you take slide film and process it in color negative chemistry, so you get a negative from a slide. But when you do it the other way around, when you process slide or color negative film in E6 chemistry, and you get these kind of very weird, odd sort of looking feels. So there's nothing like that. That's, if it was just those technical toys, for want of a better word, then I go, okay, well, there's not much going on here. But there's something, when I look at the photographers, the work that's not leaning into those technical things has I find it fascinating. I've always loved portrait photography that has not just the person, the Patrick Stewart. This is not really just a picture of Patrick Stewart. There's something else going on here. There's obviously influences of a whole bunch of people and things of that nature, which we'll look at in a bit more depth in Nadav's documentary work in a second. But it's just the photographs stand on themselves. And often, they just throw in the kind of the funky kind of cool effect, and they improve the image. They're like, little bits of herb and some seasoning that just bring out the flavor. So I love that in his work. He knows when to kind of dial it forward. He knows when to pull it back. And the result is that you get these wonderful portraits. I wish that I had the ability to take these kind of portraits with this, what seems like such a deft hand. But that's not the only string to Nadav's bow. Nadav Kandar moved to South Africa when I think he was 3. At least that's what it says. So it says here in the Book of Words. And when I'm paging through this wonderful, and it is a wonderful book of images, the first photographs that sort of strike me, well, not strike me, they're the first photographs that you see, are, and excuse the page turning noises here, are these pictures of these kids shot in a very flat, black and white, nothing too funky, craziness going on, what have you. And I look at that and I think, do you know what? That's like those David Goldblatt photographs. David Goldblatt, also another very famous South African photographer who documented sort of life in South Africa in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s and 90s up until his death. And there's surprisingly a quietness to and a simplicity to these photographs. That's why I like, where's that energy with the portraits? His documentary work, Nadav's documentary work, and I'm going to call it documentary, it may not be documentary specifically, but that's the word I'm going to attach to it, is quiet. It has a very somber's maybe the wrong word, still sort of feel to it. You see there's occasionally in the photographs or the expressions in his portraits, but here it starts to be a little bit more pronounced. It's there. And I do like a quiet photograph. I like a stillness that you can really sort of connect with what's going on. You can imagine there's just something surreal about it. It's like quite eerie. These photographs, when I look at them, they have, there's a little boy here standing, and I hope I can find a copy of this, but I'll put it up on the screen like that, right? This little kid standing in a Batman costume. I'm going to guess this is South Africa. I'm not going to flick through immediately right now because it looks like there's a Jetta in the background. There's some briars and these caravans, and it's all just misty. And you sort of look at it and I go, this is not something that's been contrived. At least I don't feel like it's been contrived. It just feels like it's this little kid was maybe playing out there on the briars, and this must be South Africa because there's like a concrete table there for Brian. There's some aloes. I thought it might be Felixstowe, which is not Felixstowe, right? But what a wonderful photograph. And I look at this one and I go, I wish that, again, I wish that, more people would kind of sit there and go, do you know what, this is something that's worth photographing. It's kind of a cool thing, it's an image that makes me smile. That's what I like about it. Maybe now it sort of makes me smile because I've got a 5-year-old and he likes dressing up as superheroes and things like that. But it's just something about it that it tickles me. I love this about his photography, that every now and again you get a photograph that just seems to come out of the left to center. It just like it breaks the expectations that we often have about serious photographers. People who take photographs for a living and who take their craft seriously, that they are they are invested in creating images. That you just see that wonderful kind of sort of funkiness come out the side. Now I've switched back to the to the Stern magazine because there are, and I do apologize, I know some people don't like it when there's an image that goes across pages and stuff, but I think there's a reason why they've done this. Is these are documentary photographs. Again, there's that word. That Nadav went over to, I believe it's China, to photograph these civil construction things, and the reason they are double page is because the publishers or the layout people are trying to get maximum size of this image. And that's because what we've got here are tiny figures, human figures, being overwhelmed by these massive constructions. These, the planet, the way that people shape the planet. That sort of harkens back a little bit to that idea of solitude, of quietness within the photographs. Yeah, maybe this is, it's because I like that kind of thing that I go and I harp on about it so much. But isn't that the point? People often say on the channel, they're like, try this photographer, look at this, or, have you considered talking about so-and-so? And often those suggestions are great because I've never heard of these people. And I go, oh yes, really, that's cool. Like that very much. And it's on my list of photographers to check out. Sometimes though, there are photographers, who are like big photographers whose work doesn't really grab me, right? So I don't focus on them. I don't have copies of their books at home, because why would I? Why would I buy books of photographers' work who I don't really care for? Nan Goldin is a famous photographer. She has created a huge body of work and is highly regarded in many circles. But I don't feel I have anything really to say about her photography. But when I come back to Nadav, I thought, well, how can I make this something that people, can actually sit there and go, oh yes, I will watch that video about a photographer I've never heard of before. And that's kind of that's a hard thing to do on YouTube, because so much of YouTube is about getting views and encouraging people to click on a video, much like you did when you clicked on this. All right, so I'm kind of stuck in this rock and a hard place. It's like, I've been thinking for years, how do I find a topic to talk about that I can use Nadav Kandar as an illustration, and by that way introduce, hopefully, to some of you who maybe not have heard of his work, to this fantastic work that is, that person stepping off the little stool. It seems so simple, seems so easy, and yet when I try to recreate it, no, just doesn't have that same thing. But I can take the ideas, I can take some of the inspiration, some of the experiments I tried of replicating Nadav's work have led me to create some other photographs that I really like, that I'm very pleased with, that, I went, cool. And that's only because, I was copying. I took something in that work that encouraged me, and I tried to recreate it and found something to add to my own bow. And in your own views, when you look at photography, check it out. Find photographers whose work you just kind of go, ah, man, this is so cool. You don't have to think that it's important work, or that this person uses X, Y, and Z rule like a boss, or any of that sort of stuff. It just has to be work that you kind of go, I really love this. And if you love it, then it means that it's resonating with something inside you. And if it's resonating with something inside you, it means you're getting closer to finding your own style, to finding what is naturally your way of expressing yourself through a photograph. I can't stress this enough. And if you want to, find ideas about, how to really get to grips with your own photography, to discover your authentic voice, there is a video or there's a link in the description. Take you to Authentic Vision Framework will help you recognize these bits and bobs inside you and help you grow as a photographer in a direction that suits you uniquely. Thank you ever so much for watching. And if you love Nadav Kandar, you're going to love this photographer here. Thank you ever so much once again, and I will see you again soon.